The House Energy, Communications, and Technology Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Scott,
Present.
Representatives Andrews, Coleman,
I think we're good right now. Hey, Marilyn, hang on just one second.
Zoom issues.
Excuse us momentarily. Do Zoom issues. Again, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Scott,
Present.
Representatives Andrews, Coleman,
Here.
Witsit,
Here.
Neely,
Here.
Burns,
Here.
Churches,
Present.
Hill,
Here.
McDonald,
Here.
McFall,
Here.
Wenzel,
Here.
Outman,
Present, remote.
Aragona,
Here, remote.
Bagol, Green,
Here remote.
Preston,
Here.
Schmaltz.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Rep. Neely moves to adopt the minutes from the 2023 meeting. Okay. So today, we have a presentation from Jerry Norcia, who is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of DTE. Will you please come forward? Welcome today. I'm glad to have you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I do want to say one thing before we get started. In the essence of time, and so that everybody gets an opportunity to ask a question, even the participants on Zoom, we're not going to have any long narrations. We're going to just ask one question, and we'll go around again, potentially to ask others. All right? All right, thank you. You may proceed.
Well, thank you, and good morning, and Chairman Scott, Vice Chair Andrews, Vice Chair Wenzel, and members of the House Energy Committee, Communications and Technology Committee. My name is Jerry Norcia. I'm Chairman and President and CEO of DTE Energy. Thank you for providing the opportunity to come before you and talk about our company. Today, I'd like to share some perspective on DTE, who we are, and what we stand for. I will cover the fundamental transformation that is underway at DTE. This transformation falls into three main areas. We are changing the way we deliver power with our grid to make it more reliable. We are transforming the way we produce power we put on the grid to cleaner sources of energy. We are upgrading our gas infrastructure for safe, reliable gas service, as well as for emission reductions. And we are doing all this while keeping energy affordable for our customers and then investing in our state's economic growth. As CEO, my responsibility is to ensure that DTE executes our plans and delivers results for all of our stakeholders. Before we dive in, I want to provide a brief update on the most recent storm activity. On Sunday, June 25th, our service territory experienced significant 55 to 60 mile an hour winds and rain that resulted in customer outages. At any given moment, 97% of our customers were not impacted by the storm. Since Sunday, we've been laser focused on the 3% of our customers who at the peak of the storm did experience an interruption, and more than 2,000 DTE team members were deployed to ensure public safety, assess damage, and make the repairs necessary to restore power to our customers. Happy to report that as of 4 a.m. this morning, 99.9% of our customers on DTE system have power. So I'm proud of what the team accomplished in a relatively short period of time. Let's move to a little bit about my background. I'm very fortunate to have experienced the American dream as a son of Italian immigrants. My family was hardworking but often lacked resources and opportunities. I was born in Toronto, but my family returned to Italy with me when I was 5 years old. We lived on my grandfather's farm. My grandfather was still plowing fields with oxen at that time, and we didn't have heat or running water in our house. At age 8, we moved from Italy to Windsor, Ontario, where my father worked as a bricklayer and as an auto worker. My mother was a janitor in a local hospital. At the time, I spoke only Italian, so I had to learn English while trying to keep up with my school studies. By the grace of God, I persevered and eventually graduated from university with an engineering degree, becoming the first of my family to do so. I was always very fortunate to work alongside my father and relatives in the construction business and learn the value of hard work, honesty, and integrity. I started my career in engineering and construction of natural gas pipelines and joined DTE in 2002 to lead its pipeline and storage business. This effort grew into an $8 billion enterprise that now is separate from DTE and is another major energy company headquartered in the city of Detroit. I moved to Michigan in 2006 and became an American citizen in 2014. My upbringing helped me recognize what poverty can do to limit people's access to opportunities. It also stirred a passion in me to focus on what we can do to help create equity within our company and our communities through access to opportunity. Now let me turn to DTE and who we are. DTE Energy serves more than 3 million electric and natural gas customers, covering 450 local communities throughout Michigan. Our 10,000 plus employees come to work every day with a purpose to improve lives with our energy. Our teams approach their work by being safe, caring, dependable, and efficient to each other and to our diverse stakeholders through daily improvement and striving to reach our aspiration of being best in the world, but also best for the world. These values extend to our robust network of primarily in-state suppliers. Just last year, this included over 2,000 Michigan-based businesses from 73 of Michigan's counties. Since 2010, DTE has invested $18 billion in Michigan's economy through in-state suppliers, creating over 65,000 jobs. These results include $900 million invested with Detroit-based suppliers and another $724 million invested with suppliers owned by women, minorities, veterans, members of the LGBTQ community, and disability-owned businesses. The very nature of our business, powering the grid and providing safe, reliable, and affordable energy to our customers, makes us a catalyst for creating prosperity for Michigan citizens, an opportunity that we don't take lightly. We do this by powering our customers' lives, accelerating decarbonization, enabling and contributing to economic development in the state, and lifting up and supporting our communities. We know all of DTE stakeholders are counting on us, and it pushes us to be better every day. DTE is also one of Michigan's largest investors of capital, which has a broad impact for communities throughout the state. Because of our capital investment, from our distribution grid to our generation fleet, DTE is one of the largest contributors to local and state taxes of any company in Michigan. Our investment for cleaner power generation, coupled with safer and more reliable electric and gas distribution systems, will catalyze new economic growth in Michigan and value for our customers. Over the next 5 years, DTE will invest nearly $22 billion into its home state of Michigan, and more than $45 billion over the next decade. Now let me turn to the fundamental transformation that is underway in the energy sector and share some insight into DTE's plans, starting with improving the reliability of our electric grid. We are following our plan to aggressively deploy resources and equipment to improve energy reliability as we make near and long-term electric distribution investments for our customers. Our plan prepares a grid for the future, both for severe and increasingly severe weather patterns and greater adoption of EVs. DTE has 45,000 miles of circuitry with roughly one-third below ground, one-third above ground that is relatively new, and one-third above ground that is quite old and needs to be rebuilt. Our four-point plan for transforming our system is well underway and showing positive results for some customers. We need to continue this work until it reaches every one of our 2.2 million electric customers. Our grid is available to our customers on average 99.9% of the time, but that 1.1% of the time that the grid is not available during intense storm periods for our customers is not what we want or what our customers want. We are executing on a 4-point plan, and we are well along on many parts of it. This plan includes trimming trees. We are 5 years into a 7-year aggressive tree trim program. Fallen trees are responsible for nearly 70% of the time our customers spend without power. Second, we are updating and maintaining existing infrastructure, replacing poles, transformers, and pole top equipment. Third, we're ramping up our pole top maintenance to a 5-year cycle and will complete the entire system by 2029. We are also rebuilding significant portions of the grid, which is 15 to 16,000 miles that I mentioned is the oldest part of our grid. This includes more strategic undergrounding in places like Detroit, where we have gas work ongoing and can coordinate with other infrastructure-related projects such as water lines. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we have to replace 15 to 16,000 miles of older circuitry in large cities like Detroit, the Grosse Pointes, Ann Arbor, Dearborn, Royal Oak, many of the older southeast Michigan communities that have this older system. And it really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to put as much of that underground as possible. And not many utilities get that opportunity, but we have that opportunity in front of us, and we'll do all we can to accomplish that. And lastly, accelerating transition to a smart grid, reaching full automation in 5 to 6 years. Our recent investments in advanced distribution management systems and our new systems operations center have laid the foundation for bringing a smart grid technology into the field. Automation will allow us to more quickly and efficiently isolate outages on a circuit, rerouting power for many of the affected customers so that they will continue to have service while we make the repairs. Since 2018, DTE has been increasing investments in pursuit of a reliable and resilient distribution grid. On circuits where this work has occurred, customers have seen a 40 to 70% improvement in both outage duration and frequency. Just to give some examples, there are circuits in Detroit, Southfield, and Southgate that have had reliability work completed in 2022 and have performed flawlessly this year. They've remained outage-free throughout the ice storms and the big snowstorms that we had. That's a great outcome on these circuits, but we need to keep accelerating our investments and tackle more circuits at a more rapid pace. This accelerated pace of investment is important. We want all of our customers to experience the benefits of these investments in reliability, outages that are less frequent, and shorter in duration. Later this fall, we will submit an updated version of our distribution grid plan to the Michigan Public Service Commission and look forward to continuing our work with all stakeholders throughout the regulatory process to make these necessary investments in improving reliability. According to a study by the Berkeley National Lab, improving our grid's availability by just 0.5% to be best in class creates $10 to $13 billion in value for our customers. Now let me address how we plan to put more clean energy on our grid. DTE believes that climate change is one of the defining issues of our time. This is why DTE is committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions and is doing so in a way that ensures both reliability and affordability for our customers. Last fall, DTE filed its proposed Clean Vision Integrated Resource Plan, which is a 20-year proposal for generating reliable and affordable electricity for our customers through a balanced and diverse mix of cleaner energy resources. The Clean Vision IRP achieves 5 primary objectives and has a host of other benefits for our customers and the state of Michigan. These include ending the use of coal in 2035 with a responsible phased retirement schedule to Bell River and Monroe coal power plants, building over 15,000 megawatts of Michigan-made wind energy and solar energy, which is enough to power approximately 4 million homes, and adding over 1,800 megawatts of energy storage to ensure our customers have reliable, clean energy, even on days when the wind is not blowing or the sun is not shining. Accelerating our previous carbon dioxide interim reduction goals, targeting 65% emission reduction in 2028, 85% in 2035, and 90% by 2040, and of course achieving our net zero goal by 2050. We will invest over $9 billion over the next 10 years into the Michigan economy, supporting more than 25,000 jobs to accomplish this transition to cleaner energy. And doing all of this while reducing the cost of clean energy transition by a projected $1.4 billion from our prior plan we filed in 2019. This proposed plan reduces carbon emissions from DTE's power generation faster than the Michigan economy-wide goals outlined in the My Healthy Climate Plan. By converting the existing infrastructure at the Bell River Power Plant from a coal unit to a natural gas peaking unit in 2025 and 26, we are able to begin the retirement of the Monroe Power Plant nearly 12 years earlier than its previously planned retirement date in 2039. The phased retirement has 2 units coming offline in 2028 at Monroe, and the last 2 units retiring in 2035, nearly 5 years earlier than our previous plan. The plan also adds 1,800 megawatts of new energy storage by 2042 to augment the build-out of our renewables investments in the state. The plan that DTE proposed is one of the best meets the needs of our customers, accelerating our carbon reduction goals and accelerating the deployment of clean energy, all the while maintaining reliability and affordability. Next, Madam Chair, I'd like to briefly touch on a critical role that natural gas plays here in Michigan. As an energy company, we are laser focused on getting as clean as we can, as fast as we can, while keeping affordability and reliability for our customers front and center. This commitment is not limited to our electric utility. Our gas company has its own unique and holistic net zero carbon emission goal by including its suppliers, operations, and customers. Today, more than 75% of the state's residents rely on natural gas because it remains the most cost-effective, reliable, and clean source for meeting Michigan's home heating needs. By modernizing our gas infrastructure, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions today while preserving the safe, reliable, and affordable energy Michigan's families and businesses depend on. The final point I will touch on today is affordability. Delivering on these commitments to improve reliability and transition to cleaner sources of energy means overall customer affordability must also be a priority for us at DTE. We are laser focused on providing affordable energy for our customers in 3 specific ways. We manage costs to help protect customers from price spikes. We offer tools to help customers control their energy consumption and save on their bills. And lastly, we provide options to help ease the burden on customers who are struggling to make ends meet, working closely with government agencies and community organizations to ensure all our customers can power and heat their homes. We're proud that our residential bills are below the national average. When fuel prices spike, like natural gas did in 2022, our customers were protected from dramatic increases in their bills, unlike our peers in Ohio and Illinois. A significant contributor to this outcome was Michigan's strong regulatory structure and energy policies like the IRP that prioritize a diverse set of energy resources to ensure in-state supply and reliability. In addition, Michigan has a unique ability to store more natural gas than any other state in the country, which helps to ensure that our state has a reliable supply of natural gas. This storage contributes to keeping natural gas affordable by enabling flexible purchasing strategies. Access to stored natural gas supply guarantees that in extreme weather condition, Michigan has the opportunity to mitigate market volatility and minimize the risk of diminished supply. Both DTE Electric and DTE Gas also offer energy efficiency programs to all customers. Since 2009, these programs have saved our customers over $4.9 billion on their cumulative lifetime energy bills. Finally, Madam Chair, I would like to personally thank you and your colleagues for passing Senate Bill 288, eliminating the sunset on the Michigan Energy Assistance Program. My colleague, Yvette Griffey, recently testified on this bill in Senate 353, which would expand energy assistance eligibility requirements to include customers up to 200% of the federal poverty level. This is a critical piece of legislation, and I ask for your committee's thoughtful consideration, Senate Bill 353. In closing, Madam Chair, today's energy landscape is changing rapidly and fundamentally, and DTE is leading the way forward to provide our customers with affordable, reliable, and clean energy they expect and deserve. By listening to our customers, we're developing the best solutions that make the most sense for Michigan, ensuring the right balance of energy sources and smart infrastructure investments to generate energy that's cleaner, more affordable, and more reliable. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it. I'm going to start with my one question. So, are there currently any issues that are impeding your company's ability to improve the grid reliability, lower rates for customers, and compensate our constituents adequately for their hardships?
We are investing heavily in the grid to create a more reliable grid. In the last handful of years, we've invested $5 billion, $5.4 billion in the grid, which was more than twice what we had invested the prior 5 years, and I've described the areas where we're investing. Going forward, we're going to invest $9 billion, and with continued regulatory support, we can make those investments. And ultimately, that creates a lot of value for our customers, as I mentioned. Reduced duration and frequency of outages has a very significant impact on customers and also the Michigan economy and providing greater value. In terms of, I think the second question you asked was compensation for lost power. And right now, Michigan has one of the highest, credit mechanisms across the country to $35 per day. And now we know that is certainly doesn't accommodate most people for the inconvenience and the cost of long duration for the small number of customers that experience a long duration outage. But our focus is that how do we think about a policy where we provide relief to customers who need those resources the most. Our low-income customers are the ones who suffer most from a long duration outage, and I'd really like for us to think together about how we move in that direction. And we've got a lot of passion for our low-income customers, and we want to think about that with you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to questions. Representative Hill.
Good morning. Thank you
Morning.
for your testimony. Speaking of low-income folks, there is a bill to support folks having battery storage so that they can meet the need when your company's not able to provide the power. I understand there's also a program to offer people generators. Could you speak to how having people have diesel-powered generators is meeting your climate goals, and how battery storage it would fit into your plans?
I think we're of the view that we have to shrink what I call, the last, small fraction of customers that where outages, where when you have significant weather events where the outages go on more than 2 or 3 days. We need to look at creative resources like batteries and also generators that we can deploy to help reduce the duration for those customers until we can build a grid that is flawless, which is going to take some time, and that's our goal. So we support the use of all technologies to try and reduce the frustration and of long duration outages.
Thank you.
Representative Burns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony today. You referenced earlier DTE's kind of action plan to do some work on the grid in Detroit and inner ring suburbs, which is, of course, of particular interest to me based on where I live and who I represent. Can you talk to us in more detail about what that process looks like and what your kind of projected timeline is for that grid infrastructure work?
Well, we've mentioned this 4-point plan. So we really prioritize circuits that are experiencing the most amount of problems, if you will, or lack of reliability. So that's sort of how we organize ourselves at DTE. And It's really, the progress is we've started with a very aggressive tree trim program where we're 5 years through a 7-year program. And that is having really significant impact on improving reliability. Secondly, the automation that we've described, which is we've accelerated that plan from a 15-year plan to a 5 to 6 year plan. That's also going to have fundamental impact on duration, the amount of time that customers spend without power, because you can quickly restore 50 to 80% of the customers in minutes, and then go to work on the damage to restore power to the other remaining customers that are without power. So those big investments will make a big difference. In addition to that, we're going to rebuild 15 to 16,000 miles of the oldest parts of our grid, and that'll also make a fundamental difference. And we're going to try to put as much of that underground as possible, as much as is economically possible and feasible to do. So that will have significant impact. So we're going to have some near-term impact from continued tree trimming, fundamental impact from what I would call medium-term automation, and then the longer-term impact will be the rebuild of the oldest parts of our grid.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I may, just my question specifically refers to when you reference the 15 to 16,000 miles of infrastructure. Do you have an estimated timeline for that component specifically?
Yeah, that's the longest part of our plan. That'll take quite a bit of time, 15 to 20 years to build out, 15 to 16,000 miles of grid. We're planning to ramp up to about 1,000 miles a year. That's a very large undertaking.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Representative McFall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here today. I have a question regarding your latest rate request, which is the largest that has ever been asked for. How do you justify, or how do I explain to residents in my district who can barely pay their bills now and can't always count on their service, that type of rate increase, when you made over $1 billion last year? And I'm not dinging you for this because I'm all about capitalism as well. Your total compensation is over $10 million a year. Sure. So I have people that can barely pay their bills, and you're asking for such a large rate increase.
Let's take those one at a time. So, the rate increase, it's our first rate increase in 4 years. And we've invested over $5 billion in the grid, and we worked really hard to keep our rates flat during COVID so that our customers wouldn't suffer incremental burden during COVID. So we did all we could in terms of cutting costs and doing all the great things that we do at DTE to maintain rates flat for 4 years. The increase that we're looking for, and you've seen some of the staff recommendations, we expect that it'll have an impact of about 25 or 30 cents a day on the average customer bill. Now, we don't like rate increases, but I think for our low-income customers, what we need to do and work together on is how do we get creative in terms of creating policy that helps lessen the burden on low-income customers as we make this transition to a more reliable future and to a cleaner future. So that's my thought on that. Secondly, on the profits of DTE, I know that's been a hot topic, but I just want to give you some facts. So DTE brings in about $2 billion of cash every year after they pay all their employees and pay all their vendors and pay their debt costs, and which includes profits, the $2 billion. But we invested $3.4 billion last year, so we're investing more than what we bring in, and we have to fund that difference, usually through debt and also investors that come in and help fund that gap. And the way that gap gets funded is through mortgage-style debt that we have to repay. Otherwise, we have different issues, right, that we don't want to have with our company if you don't pay your debts. And then secondly, investors come in, people like pension plans, 401ks that support the rebuild of the distribution grid and also the transition to cleaner generation. So we're spending more than what we're bringing in. So we are reinvesting all of our profits plus some. So I think that's good. In terms of compensation, executive compensation, 86% of my compensation is not in rates, and over 50% of all my executives' compensation is not in rates, and that's been traditionally the case in Michigan for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, I'm not dinging you for having that type of compensation. It's just very difficult to justify to residents in my district is all when you hear such large sums of money. But thank you.
Representative Churches.
Thank you. So on Sunday, I
I go to my parents' house on Sundays, and I was just going over and going to help my mom make dinner, and I hang out with my parents. And I live in Wyandotte; they live on Groseal. They had no power, and there was no storm in sight. And this is not the first time this has happened. It also happened on Easter. My mom called me, and she's like, "I have a ham in the oven. We have no power. There is no cloud in the sky." And I was in my parents' driveway, and they live in a cul-de-sac, and some of the neighbors started to come out, and they know that I'm a local, I'm an elected, so they are asking me for answers, as they should. And I don't have answers for them. I had 10,000 residents without power on the island of Groseal without any drops of rain. And I know there was a storm coming. I know now that we know there was a problem in Riverview feeding the island power. But when I looked on the app, it didn't show that many residents without power. I drove around the island. I saw Kroger was out, and I have a plan because I text people that I care about in my life that I know live on different parts of the island or different parts of my community. Text my girlfriends like, "Hey, do you have power? Do you have power?" And I want to paint a picture in the minds of people of this has happened so many times this year, not like once or twice, and not just like a major ice storm, but this was a day before a storm happened. And I had someone specifically that I really care about. And I know that she was with her father-in-law at his home because he had in-home hospice care. He passed away on Sunday. And thank God it was not due to the losing of the power of the storm, because it happened like just directly before. But just like being without power in a home with your father-in-law who passed away from mesothelioma, like that is something. And like your care is impacted. Some people need life-saving care due to this power. And this power is a right. It is a right of all of our citizens to have it, and to lose it so often. And to have, I mean, my girlfriend's losing their breast milk, their medicine they can't afford, and we're not reimbursing them to fill up their refrigerators. They don't have the money to do that. So for me, I got to hear all these wonderful things that DTE is doing, and I appreciate your service and your willingness to collaborate. But I guess the reason that you're here isn't because of all the good things you're doing. The reason you're here is because the people that we represent are suffering, and we are watching it happen. So I don't want to hear all the things that are great. I want to know, what exactly do you see the most critical things that you're facing with your team in a very honest and transparent way? And what are the main top 2 or 3 things that are impeding you from serving our people? And what is your plan to fix it within your company and in collaboration with us? Because I want to move forward, and I want to collaborate with you, but I need to know what I need to do so I can service the people that I represent in the best way possible without feeling like I did on Sunday, feeling helpless, like I didn't have the answers and I had to wait. And knowing that care of these individuals and their livelihood is being impacted too frequently.
So first of all, I'm really sorry for your loss. That's a significant loss, and my prayers and thoughts with you and your family on your loss. Secondly, we did have an outage on Groseal Sunday afternoon, and it lasted several hours, and it was a substation issue. But I will follow up on what we need to do to prevent this from recurring. If it's, it sounds like it's happening quite frequently, so we'll follow up on that and make sure that we understand what the problem is there, so we solve it once and for all. In terms of what we're doing, I think what impedes us, what we try to balance, is the level and pace of investment with affordability, and so that we don't put too much of a tremendous burden on our customers from an affordability perspective. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to thread that needle to say, let's invest as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to really create a flawless grid for this state. We need it. It is our future. We're going to continue to electrify. The weather's going to continue to get worse. These big storms that used to happen every 50 years now are happening every 2 or 3 years. So we need to make that. We need to make that transition, but we need to pace it so that we don't burden our customers too much from an affordability perspective, but also make sure that Michigan remains competitive. So that we can attract business and growth and more jobs and more prosperity to the state. So that's really our number one objective. I can tell you, you come and sit with us every day if you like. That's what we think about. That's what we talk about every minute of the day in our distribution operations and across the company.
Thank you. Representative Preston?
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I come from an area of Upper Michigan where in the rural area, outages are pretty much commonplace for us. Looking for a root cause as to what's been happening. It sounds like there's been quite a bit of catch-up occurring on the distribution grid regarding maintenance, work plan, automation. I'm just curious, what do you see has been the aggravating issues in the past up until now that has really prevented you guys from engaging in the work plan on your distribution grid, I think the way that you wanted to, because you're only as good as your last bill and your last outage in this industry?
So I would say that, a decade ago, we were not seeing the level of intensity from the storms that we're seeing now. Like, we plot wind velocities above 40 miles an hour. And I can tell you, in the last decade, that's on a steep incline. So that's just wind velocities over 40 miles an hour. So more and more intense storms, more frequency of storms is what we've seen in the last decade, started to see over the last decade. And then these big storms that roll in. And, we're seeing that across the whole country. I mean, every time you turn on the TV, there's massive storms in the south, and then there's storms rolling into the north. This is a new reality for us. And I can tell you that all CEOs across this country, electric CEOs, are talking about this. This is a big, big problem for the electric industry, and everybody is faced with it. So what are the answers to that? The answer is we've accelerated investment in a fundamental way. I mentioned that we've doubled our investment in the grid over the last 5 years from where it was the prior 5 years. For example, tree trimming, 7-8 years ago we were investing about $65 million a year. Today we're investing almost $200 million a year. 7-8 years ago we were investing $250 million into the grid. Now we're investing $1.5 billion into the grid every year. That's a big, big change, and that's what's going to get us out of and prepare us for the future and get us out of this problem we have where these big storms cause a lot of grief for our customers. And so we just need to keep moving in that direction. It'll take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a big grid. You heard me talk about the fact it's 45,000 miles. We got to touch all 45,000 miles and have it maintain at the highest level of standards and start to replace the stuff that needs to be replaced, which is about 15,000 miles. So I think that's how we move forward as a state. We need to move together. And we're moving as fast as we can, and trying to manage affordability at the same time that we're doing all of this.
Representative Andrews?
Thank you, Chair. So as we're talking about the investments that are being made in the grid, Michigan currently has some of the highest rates in the country, and the rate that they're increasing right now means that we're going to keep climbing up that list more than likely as time goes on. And so I think you brought up a good point a minute ago about trying to make Michigan an attractive place to do business and the cost of electricity factoring in to our ability to attract industry to the state. And so I'm wondering, not just on your end but on our end, what sorts of things can be done at this point to slow these rate increases to make the investment while continuing to make the investments that need to be made in the grid, so that Michigan can stay competitive with its neighbors who we're currently outstripping at the moment, and how much it costs to do business in Michigan.
So two thoughts there. So rates turn into bills, and our bills are lower than the national average. And the reason for that is because we've had a very aggressive, two reasons. One is a very aggressive energy efficiency program, which reduces usage. And we also live in a colder climate where people use less electricity. So you're putting less juice through the wires. So you end up with a little higher rates but lower bills because of all of that. From a competitive perspective, we can compete with anybody in the country, and I think we've shown that. We've attracted battery plants in our service territory, so we can offer the same rates. And rates are really important for large industrial customers. When you're putting the same amount of juice through our poles and our wires, we can compete with anybody in the country. So we feel like we've got good products and services to attract economic development into the state, and I think that's been evidenced by the two utilities in the state. We've been very successful.
Representative McDonough?
I just want to give an observation. I've heard about a dozen times the idea that it's not the rates, that it's the bills. And that's like saying that the cost isn't what you pay at the gas pump per gallon, but it's like how much it costs people on average to fill their car. It's just not accurate to say that it's the bills that matter, it's the rate that matters. And the fact that bills change may be because people do or do not have gas from DTE, but the rates matter. And the fact that the rates are extremely high matters. And I just want to say that, and I think that's just a fact that you can't really object to.
Rates lead to bills, and obviously they influence bills, but usage also matters, and I think usage also matters in creating the bills and the rates. So happy to get into a little more detail on that one, but I understand your point. Thank you.
Can you tell us what programs has your company implemented to help improve reliability of the system and also the redundancy? What are you implementing to alleviate outages, system outages?
Yeah, so again, I've talked a little bit about this today. It's really our 4-point plan that we're deep into the execution mode. It's the tree trimming, right? High quality maintenance on the grid, making sure that what does operate well continues to operate extremely well. And third, it's really automation that we want to accomplish over the next 5 to 6 years. And lastly is our longer term plan to replace 15 to 16,000 miles of grid that's quite old and needs to be replaced, and try to put as much of that underground as possible. Thank you.
Representative Hill.
Thank you. I want to go a little bit into two things, if I may, on affordability and reliability. On the question of affordability, the tree trimming cycle is the number that clarifies, Tree trimming is how we actually make sure that things don't fall down on the lines and poles. And it's my understanding that your cycle was closer to 8 years and now is 5. And while you can, I think folks have known that extreme storms were coming. And so to say that, oh, we know now, but we've known about climate change in some circles for decades. And to say that, oh, well, we're going to do 5 years now when you were working on an 8-year cycle is, so there was a lack of investment. And I think that lack of investment, that your profits increased because you don't, the way that we have the regulatory structure in Michigan, tree trimming doesn't provide profits. So I'm asking to speak about the cycle of tree trimming is better now, but you're playing catch up, as one of my colleagues said. And I think the fact that that's happened there is some accountability there. And then the other question is on cost and reducing those costs. And in your analysis, what are the lowest cost forms of power? Thank you. Power generation for electricity.
So the question is the lowest cost forms of energy. I mean, we have a very diverse portfolio that we believe not only leads to the most economic cost for electricity, but also reliability. When you think about our portfolio that we're migrating to, it'll be heavy on renewables, very large investment in renewables. We're going to invest about $9 billion in clean energy going forward. We're going to retire all of our coal, so we'll have that. And then we also have natural gas as a resource, and we have nuclear as a resource. And that's been very beneficial to our customers. I mean, if you look at what happened to bills and rates in Illinois and Ohio in this last year or two when natural gas ran way up, very significant increases, like 20, 40, 50% increases in people's bills. That didn't happen in Michigan. And the reason it didn't happen in Michigan is because we've got a regulated model that affords us the ability to build a diversified portfolio, just like you would with your 401k. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So the fact that we have nuclear, we've got gas, we've got renewables, and we've got coal right now helped us moderate that impact on customers. So my recommendation always would be is let's not put all our eggs in one basket and make sure that we always have a balanced portfolio. And that's how we provide the lowest possible cost to our customers, and also reliability, so that you're not beholden to one resource.
So the tree trimming question, the cycles of tree trimming. Sorry.
What was your question there, please?
Yeah. So the question is, you were on an 8-year cycle. Trees grow pretty fast or pretty tall in 8 years. So why wasn't it 5 years before? And what obviously you've understood that change is needed. So could you address how that change and what there's an accountability. People ask, why do the outages happen?
Sure.
We're hearing over and over again the outages happen because of tree trimming. Tree trimming was not done on a 5-year cycle. It was being done on an 8-year cycle.
So we changed our practices, I would say, 7 or 8 years ago on how we trim trees. Prior to that, what we were doing is, we were cutting a 25-foot diameter circle around the center line of the pole, if you can picture that, okay? So it left a lot of underhang and a lot of overhang. And that was okay when the wind wasn't blowing as much and the velocities weren't as high as they started to develop. When we started to see the wind velocities really start to wreak havoc on our grid, as those wind velocities rose, we decided to change our standard. So what we do now is we go 10 feet either side of the pole, center line of the pole, take the underhang out and the overhang out on our most critical circuits, and we moved to a 5-year cycle. We did a lot of benchmarking, and the utilities who were suffering from severe weather patterns in the south is who we went to visit to try and understand how were they doing it. So it wasn't that the tree trimming wasn't being done, it was that we really changed it to a fundamentally different standard, much more aggressive. And that took time to get, rolling, as well as get our customers used to the idea that we were going to take a lot more trees than we ever have taken. And some of our circuits, it turned into more of a logging operation and than it did a trimming operation. So it's been a big job. We're 5 years through a 7-year cycle. It's making huge impact. If I compare our 2017 storm to our, storm that we had this year, this year at peak we had about 16% of our customers without power during an ice storm, which is really catastrophic on trees and on wires. And in 2017, we almost had 40% of our customers out during a heavy windstorm. So it is working, and we just need to get it done and then stay on a 5-year cycle. And we're actually looking at some circuits where the trees grow a little faster. We're a lot more sophisticated with data and technology, like LiDAR, that you can actually track the species of trees and how fast they grow. And now you might have to go back and trim some species in 3 years versus 5 years. So we're going to get a lot more sophisticated based on species and growth rates of trees than we've ever been, because it's a big deal. And we need to make sure that we continue to do this right so that our customers don't suffer, these interruptions.
Thank you. Representative Bacall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for coming here today. The Ludington pumping facility is certainly an impressive facility that I'm learning more about. Can you speak to the ability of the pumping station to provide electricity in times of needs? And I recently read an article about some efforts that you guys were making to mitigate aquatic life and the loss of it, marine things like that.
Sure. So Ludington, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a big really pumped hydro facility. And what we do is at night, when there's not a lot of demand on the system, we pump water from Lake Michigan up into a very large lake, man-made lake. And, that was built in the 60s by consumers and DTE. And we share that about 50-50. And it's a very large battery system, because what we do is we fill it up at night when there's no demand. And then during the day, when we need the power, we let the water flow back into Lake Michigan. And, gravity basically turns turbines and it creates electricity. And it's a very unique battery system in the state and in the world. At one time, I think it was the largest pump hydro facility in the world. And it's very valuable to us and our customers, because when we have more and more renewables on the system, that, perhaps when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, we can use that facility to provide backup. So it's a very valuable investment, and it's become even more valuable to our customers as we go forward and introduce more and more intermittent resources.
Representative Burns?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that many Michiganders were sick. some were dying, and many more were struggling as a result. Some were struggling to pay their bills. And for many folks like myself, DTE is the only option that we have for a power provider. At that same time, a dark money group affiliated with DTE funneled around 6 figures based on reporting into a campaign that opposed Governor Whitmer's pandemic policies, one of which included protecting residents in the state from utility shutoffs during this tremendous time of, I think, collective grief and economic strain, again, for many folks. So I'd like to get your thoughts on, one, getting dark money out of politics, specifically where DTE affiliated groups are concerned. And what are your thoughts as well, and would you support ending utility shutoffs, especially, again, during really challenging times such as a pandemic?
So let's start with, the challenge for our low-income customers during the pandemic. We voluntarily suspended shutoffs for months during that period of time. And I personally worked with the Michigan Public Service Commission and the Department of Health and Human Services in Michigan to make sure that our customers got assistance as quickly as possible. And I'm really proud of what we accomplished between DTE and the 2 agencies, that we streamlined a process that used to take 30 to 40 days to get energy assistance into customers' hands that was available from the federal government and the state government. And from 30 to 40 days to like 3 or 4 days. That was a big deal. And I'm really proud of what we did. We were able to share that with the industry, and we actually received recognition from the White House for that great program and the great work we did with our low-income customers during the pandemic to avoid hardship for our customers. And in addition to that, like I said, we also kept our rates flat for 4 years during that period of the pandemic. And not only did we do that, but we also took on a great amount of civic responsibility during the pandemic, where we distributed 3 million masks to hospitals, fire stations, police stations that needed our assistance. We distributed 50,000 tablets to Detroit Public School students who did not have access to electronic devices. And we led that effort, and we made that happen. So I'm pretty proud of what we did during the pandemic. As far as this contribution, I'm not sure which fund you're referring to, but we did not make any contribution to any fund that would hinder Governor Whitmer's efforts to protect people during COVID. And as a matter of fact, our chairman at that time, Jerry Anderson, was a key partner for Governor Whitmer to help the corporate community and medical community come together to help the state sort of shut down the appropriate facilities in the appropriate way. And then once that was over, we also helped the governor and her staff reopen the state. And so we used all of our work and influence to make sure all of that happened in a reasonable way to protect the citizens of Michigan, which includes our 10,000 employees, by the way.
I appreciate that, and those are all lovely things. I'd also like to acknowledge that the way dark money works, and the reason that it's called dark money, is that it's not direct, right? And it's not as easily traceable. So the point is not to say that someone directly with DTE wrote a check and put it in an account. That's not how that would have worked. This was an affiliated organization. And I will say, all of the things you mentioned sound lovely, but that doesn't undo the gut-wrenching fact that the only source for power that people had to turn to was also, again, through an affiliated organization or group, doing things to undermine their access to power during such a critical time. So I appreciate what you've shared. It doesn't really get to my question, though. Thank you.
Representative Schmaltz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. You talked about how you wanted to work together to help our lower income individuals, and I think we all welcome that. Do you have any specific ideas or policy or areas that we could start working on to start helping these individuals?
I do. My thought is twofold on this, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about this, is that if we can make bills more affordable for low-income customers and tie it somehow to their percentage of income, if you will, that could go a long way to, I would say, fundamentally resolving this issue in the state of Michigan. And, not all customers need assistance. Even customers that have low incomes, about half of our low-income customers find a way to balance all of their needs and manage their needs. But for some customers, about 50% of our low-income customers, they have other extenuating circumstances where they need this assistance. And I think if we can tie energy assistance to how much people make, I think it could be a really fundamental opportunity for us to change the future of our customers, low-income customers in this state. Continued energy efficiency. I think what we also find is that there's a lot of resources that go towards improving homes. What we find is that our low-income customers live in the worst housing stock in terms of energy efficiency. So I think investment in housing stock to make homes more efficient and more affordable for our customers in many different ways, that's a big game changer too. So when I think about how do we help our low-income customers, one is let's tie bills and rates to what they can afford. And then secondly, how do we move together and bring all the resources available, both federally, state, and from the utilities who have energy efficiency funding to drive at the root cause, which is helping low-income customers consume less energy.
Thank you. Thank you for making this a big focus. I
It
appreciate
is. It's a personal passion of mine. It's something I've been working on for 20 years.
Thank you. Representative McFall.
Thank you, Chair. So you have mentioned about the grid improvements that you guys have made. Is there a map that actually shows what has been improved and where it has been improved? Because you gave the example of Royal Oak, which, by the way, happens to be one of the more wealthy areas of southeast Oakland County, because the areas that I represent seem to have the grids don't seem to be getting updated. I have a larger lower income population, a larger minority population, and those ones seem to be on the end of the list versus the front of the list. And those are also, if it's a personal passion of yours, those are also, the people that you want to help. So is there a map of some kind that actually shows where the grid improvements have occurred and where they are going to be occurring next?
The answer is yes, and we do file it with the commission, so we'd be happy to sit down with you and share those maps with you and go through it in a great amount of detail. But just to give you a thought for you to think about, 25% of our strategic capital to improve the grid in the last 5 years has gone into the city of Detroit, and they only represent 14% of our customer base. So we've been over-investing in communities where there's low-income customers, and this has been a comment that's been made often, but I'd like to share the data with you so that you can see that we are making fundamentally more improvements in cities like Detroit, where there's a large concentration of poverty, than we are in other communities. As a matter of fact, that investment's reduced the frequency outages in Detroit by 45%, which is more than how much it's been reduced in the rest of our service territory in the last 5 years, and a 72% reduction in duration. So we're making fundamental investments, and I got to tell you, it was a pretty cool thing to see when we started going deep into the city of Detroit, where we worked with the city to clear out alleys that hadn't been cleared out for 30 to 40 years, where we first had to get the debris out of the alleys so we could get access to do the tree trimming and replace poles and wires. And I've never seen residents more happy for us doing not only getting at the trees and getting at the wires to make sure that they could have reliable service, but the fact that we made alleys accessible and a lot safer. And it was a great partnership with the city of Detroit, where we pushed some of the debris out of the alleys. They picked it up and took it away. And so not only were we fixing their power, but we were also making their neighborhoods more livable, if you will.
I appreciate that. If you could get me that information,
Love to.
I would love to see that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Speaking of the grid, can you tell me how you identify where there's a problem on the grid during an outage?
Well, there's several ways. One is we've got automated meters. So most of our information comes from our automated meters, so we get information from our meters that say, hey, we're out, because every meter eventually sends a signal to our operations center. Secondly, customers have the ability to go on their app and say, hey, I've got a power outage, so that's another signal that we get. Or they call our call center and let us know that they have a power outage, or they go on the web. So there's really 3 or 4 ways that we triangulate to find out which customers don't have power.
Okay, thank you. Representative Preston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This year's MISO's planning and resource auction went fairly well. And from what I've read, things like delayed retirements of some of the baseload generation, imports from the southern regions, because I believe Region 7's a net importer. There's concern that that's not repeatable going forward, that with the retirements of a lot of the baseload generation that's going to occur and the declining margin that's occurring in the southern regions, how do you see things going forward with the resource auction? Are we going to have a repeat of last year? Because I'm reading a lot in events on the MISO market that the future is relatively uncertain when it comes to price stability through the region.
So this is something that we plan for and think about extensively. You know, when we filed our integrated resource plan, as we retire our coal assets, the first thing that we worry about is reliability. We don't want to destabilize the grid, right? That's happened in other jurisdictions. You know, we've seen it happen in California and other states. We've seen it happen in Europe in a fundamental way. And so we paid very careful attention that as we retire our coal plants, we're replacing it with assets that can be called on when you need them. So for example, natural gas assets are there when you need them. Nuclear assets are there when you need them. Now, solar and wind are fabulous resources, but sometimes you can't count on them when you need them. So we need to have this portfolio approach where we need to have natural gas, we need to have battery systems, we need to have renewables, and we need to have nuclear. And I think if we continue on that path as a state, then we can assure ourselves that we're going to have a reliable grid and also achieve fundamental carbon reductions.
This is a follow-up. If we find ourselves at the southern regions having a net deficit, being a net importer, where does that put us?
Well, at DTE, I can speak to what we're doing at DTE. I can't speak for the whole state, but our goal is to be self-sufficient and not have to rely on imports during critical periods of time so that we have enough generation in our fleet to be able to supply our customers.
Thank you. Representative Churches.
Thank you. I just wondered, so on Sunday when I was experiencing the outage, I looked online and the information, I don't think it had been updated yet. And I know sometimes that's just a timing thing, but I wondered if in the future, if there would be a way or if you had representatives, because everyone that I called Winston. He's so kind to me. He was with his kids and he was giving me information. Like he was driving his car. He's like, I'm going to call you. And he was texting me with updates. But instead of me reaching out to you, is there a more efficient way that your team would be open to collaborating to, like in my community in on Groseal Township, when there's a water main break, all the residents in that area get a text message to their phone directly. The constituents of Groseal Township were posting on Groseal Now, who doesn't have power? Why don't you have power? All of this stuff. And as a local leader, I want to be able to give them updated information in a very urgent manner. And I think that could be improved, both on your behalf and my behalf. And I wondered if you had ideas of ways in which we can collaborate where I already feel welcome to call your representatives, but where they're calling me. So, because I called my township supervisor and then I texted all of the people that I could and let them know, like, if something's going on in Riverview, it should be updated by this time. But I just wondered if you had any ideas.
It's a good encouragement. We do have a process where when the AMI meters report back that they're out, we do text our customers that have given us their cell phone numbers or email if they prefer email. But it's not perfect, and I think we need to move towards a system where there's no delay. I think you're right in certain instances when you have a very large outage, sometimes the system that actually delivers the information back is not reliable, and we need to improve that. During most days, it's like 100% reliable, but when you have big outages, it does need some investment to allow that information to move a little more quickly from the meters back to our headquarters so we can start texting customers. But we also probably need to have a process to make sure you're informed as quickly as possible. I mean, I got a call right away on Sunday when it happened because it was a big outage. And again, we apologize for that horrible inconvenience, but it took us 2 or 3 hours to get it put back together and up and running again. But yes, we need to work on that. That's an area of improvement. It's also something that I'm on our team about constantly, that we need to be able to provide real-time information to our customers in the most accurate way possible. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. I will honestly say that your team does reach out to me frequently when there are outages, and they update me very regularly. Thank you. Representative Hill.
Thank you. I want to dig in a little bit more on the question of rate increases. Currently, Michigan allows utilities to file for rate increases every year, while allowing the IRPs, I believe, every 5 years. When the IRP process was initiated, that was the idea. The goal was to not save companies the burden of having to ask for rate increases every year. And yet you're filing 1,000-page rate increase requests. Now, I've heard you say that you haven't had a rate increase in 4 years. It's my understanding that the rate increase requests, however, have come in, and there was delays due to COVID. Could you please speak to how often you've asked for rate increases, what those rate increases were, and what the consequent decision was from the Public Service Commission on how much the rates were increased?
We filed our first rate increase, I think, after COVID. I think it was 2 or 3 years after COVID, the onset of COVID. So we worked really hard to keep our rates flat during that period. As I mentioned, we had about a 0.5% rate increase in the last rate case. And we're in for a rate case right now as we speak to address the $5 billion and $5.5 billion that we invested, and also the investments that we're going to make for some time going forward, which that amounts to, we expect it'll be 25 to 30 cents a day impact on customers for those investments. The IRP addresses a different matter. It addresses generation, not necessarily the entire investment portfolio that we're making in the grid and in generation. And if there are very large investments there, they are discussed and approved in the IRP, but not all investments are discussed and approved in an IRP. It's really focused on how we produce power. It doesn't really focus on things like how we maintain the system, the grid, and also maintain our generation fleet, and also the operations of the company.
Thank you. So do you think the idea of having distribution plans be approved by the Public Service Commission, similar to the IRP, would be a process that would allow for those costs to be better anticipated and those costs to be negotiated with stakeholders through the case process?
I think the process that we have right now works really well. We file a distribution grid plan with the commission that lays out the next 5 years of how we're going to invest, and talks about a 10 and 15-year plan as well, with a bunch of different scenarios on weather and demand and so on and so forth. And then when we file the rate case, which is pretty comprehensive, it looks at all of that, plus what we're doing with our generation fleet and other parts of our company, like technology investments, which are pretty important. So I think the rate case process is a good process because it looks at the company holistically, and all the interveners and people who want to look at all our records to see where we're investing dollars on behalf of our customers. I think they get a broader picture and a total picture. If you start breaking it up, perhaps the challenge with that is customers never really get to see the whole picture, and the people who represent our customers. And so we think the rate case process is a good way to look at the whole picture.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Norcia, for coming today.
My pleasure.
We
you.
have thoroughly enjoyed this. We appreciate you coming and answering our questions. And thank you.
Thank you, and
so
have
much.
a good day and safe day.
Wonderful. Okay, with there being no further business before the committee is adjourned.